The camera fades in slowly, revealing a sleek NBC studio bathed in cool, calculated lighting that casts a sense of tension before a single word is spoken. The countdown has ended, the on-air sign glows red, and millions of viewers across the country are already leaning forward in their living rooms, waiting. This isn't just another morning show interview. It has been teased for days, promoted with headlines like, Savannah Guthrie takes on Karoline Leavitt, the interview you can't Mississippi. From the very first second, the atmosphere screams of confrontation. Savannah Guthrie sits tall at her anchor's desk, shuffling a stack of papers she doesn't need to shuffle, because she knows the cameras are capturing every gesture. It's theater, and she is the actress who has built her reputation on putting powerful figures on the defensive. There's a glint of expectation in her eyes, the kind of gleam that says she is confident this will be her moment to prove once again why she's the queen of tough interviews. Her producers whisper in her earpiece, "Push her early. Don't give her room." Across from her, Karoline Leavitt sits with a very different kind of energy. Calm, composed. Not a single note in front of her, not a folder to hide behind, only the quiet confidence of someone who knows she has nothing to lose and everything to gain. She adjusts her posture, glances briefly at the cameras, and offers the faintest smile, almost as if to signal, "I know what you're about to try, and I'm ready." This smile isn't just for Savannah. It's for the millions watching, many of whom have been told by mainstream outlets that Karoline is too young, too untested, too fragile to stand toe-to-toe with an institution like Guthrie. But tonight, in this moment, that narrative is already cracking. The air in the studio is heavy, so heavy that even the audience members in the live taping feel it pressing on them. Phones are ready, clips are already being planned for Twitter, YouTube, TikTok. Everyone knows that the first 30 seconds will decide the tone of this battle. The tension is so sharp it's almost audible. Guthrie leans forward, ready to launch her first question like a spear. The audience waits, holding its collective breath. And then, it begins. The first question isn't a question, it's a charge sheet with a smile. Savannah lifts her eyes from the stack of papers like a prosecutor approaching the jury. "Ms. Leavitt, you've been accused of spreading divisive rhetoric on immigration and voting policy. Multiple outlets have flagged your talking points as misleading. Why should viewers trust you tonight?" The cadence is crisp, practiced. A producer nods in the control room. This is the opening they storyboard. Karoline doesn't blink. She lets the words hang, the way a counterpuncher watches a jab extend too far. "Savannah," she says evenly, "you just used 3 labels and 0 facts. If we're doing trust tests, let's start with transparency. Tell your viewers which outlets wrote your question." A beat. The audience murmurs. Savannah pivots, "This isn't about me." Karoline leans in, voice lower, steadier. "It's about whether this interview is a search for truth, or a performance of it." Savannah fires again, faster now. "Do you support policies that restrict ballot access?" Karoline's answer comes like a clean snap pass. "I support policies that make it easy to vote and hard to cheat, voter ID, accurate rolls, more hours, more oversight. You can call that restrictive. Most Americans call it common sense." She doesn't look at Savannah, she looks into camera too, like she's talking to a mother at her kitchen table. In the control room someone says, "She's playing to the lens." Another replies, "She's winning it." Guthrie reaches for authority. Fact-checkers have debunked that framing. Karoline smiles, small, almost sympathetic. Fact-checkers once told parents the schools were fine, told shop owners the city was safe, told border towns the surge was a myth. Viewers at home, ask yourselves, did those claims match your life? A rustle moves across the studio seats, the unmistakable sound of people shifting when something lands. Savannah tries a new angle, speed. "Let's talk extremism. You've praised governors who bus migrants to other states." Karoline cuts in, soft but immovable. "I've praised leaders who force federal conversation by exposing federal failure. When Washington won't listen to numbers, it hears buses." She doesn't gloat, she doesn't need to. The line is already clipping itself for social media. The temperature rises. Savannah presses, so you're comfortable using human beings as props? Karoline's reply is immediate. No, I'm uncomfortable with leaders who create crises and then shame the people living with them for showing America the cost. If the White House calls a policy humane, why is the footage always blurred? The audience exhales, half laugh, half disbelief. Guthrie interrupts, answer the question, but Karoline has. She steadies the pace, shifts to the ground she chose. Here's what I won't do, Savannah. I won't pretend headlines are reality. Reality is the grocery bill, the rent, the flight cancelled again, the school that teaches everything but reading. If telling the truth about that is divisive, then maybe the country's divided between people who feel it, and people who don't. For a heartbeat, the studio is silent. Savannah glances toward the clock, then back to Karoline, reloading. Critics say you're all performance, no substance. Karoline nods once. Substance is results. Show me safer streets, better schools, lower prices, secure borders, then call me a performer. Until then, I'll perform the one act the press forgot, asking who paid the price. It's not a shout. It's a knell. Somewhere a producer mouths, clip that. Savannah straightens, the practiced calm of a veteran anchor reclaiming posture. But the dynamic has shifted. She's now chasing control she assumed she owned. Karoline, hands folded, waits, not as prey, but as equal. The live audience finally remembers to breathe. Savannah shifts gears, aware the interview is slipping from her grasp. Her tone sharpens, her pace quickens. Let's move to January 6th, Ms. Levitt. You've defended figures tied to that day. Do you honestly expect the American people to believe you're for democracy when you side with insurrectionists? The room tightens. That word, insurrectionists, is meant to be the hammer blow, the unanswerable charge. Karoline doesn't flinch. She tilts her head, lets silence fill the space, then responds with surgical calm. Savannah, here's the problem. You're reciting a label, not telling a story. Democracy isn't defended by repeating catchphrases, it's defended by facts. And the fact is this: I condemned violence then, I condemn it now. But let's be honest, Americans also saw cities burn, police precincts attacked, federal courthouses under siege in 2020. Where were your interviews then? Did those rioters get the same words you just used for me? The audience stirs. A few clap. Savannah presses harder, voice rising. This isn't about 2020, this is about you. Karoline cuts back, steady and low, the voice of someone who knows she has the upper hand. Exactly, it's always about me, never about them. That's the double standard people at home already know. And that's why trust in media is at historic lows. She leans into the camera, not the anchor's eyes. Viewers don't need me to say it, they feel it every time they turn on the news. Guthrie tries to tighten control, her words stacking quickly. So you're refusing to distance yourself from election deniers? Karoline answers with clarity, I'm refusing to distance myself from voters, millions of them, who asked questions. You can call them names, I call them Americans. And the minute journalists stop labeling citizens as threats, maybe we can actually start answering those questions instead of burying them. The crowd murmurs again, this time longer, heavier. The control room panics, a producer signals, cut to commercial, but the director shakes his head, this is too hot to leave. Savannah realizes she's lost tempo and pivots again, critics will say you're dodging. Karoline smiles faintly. No, Savannah, dodging is when you spend 5 years avoiding Hunter Biden questions, or ignoring border footage, or explaining away inflation as transitory. What I'm doing right now, that's answering. Her words hang in the air. The live studio is stone silent, not from boredom but because everyone senses the reversal. Guthrie, America's morning voice, just found herself in the witness box of her own program, and Karoline is holding the gavel. Savannah's eyes flick down to her notes, she's trying to recover her rhythm. But the damage is done, the audience is no longer watching her for authority, they're watching Karoline for answers. In live television, that's a lethal shift. You can almost feel the camera operators leaning closer, sensing they're capturing a rare moment. The guest has seized the wheel, and the host is clinging to the edges. "Let me ask you this plainly," Guthrie says, forcing a smile that doesn't quite land. "If you want to be seen as a credible leader, why not take a clear stand against Trump, against the chaos, against the lies? Isn't leadership about drawing hard lines?" It's the kind of question crafted in prep rooms, sharpened by producers to be unanswerable. A yes would alienate her base, a no would make headlines. Either way, it was meant to box her in. Karoline doesn't take the bait. Instead, she flips the frame. "You talk about chaos, Savannah. But tell me, who caused more chaos, the voters who asked questions, or the government that locked kids out of schools for 2 years, crushed small businesses, and printed money until inflation stole every family's paycheck?" Leadership isn't about parroting your producer's talking points. It's about naming the real chaos makers and fixing what they broke. The audience breaks into scattered applause. Savannah tries to talk over it, but the sound cuts through. "This isn't a rally, this is journalism," she fires back. Karoline pounces. "No, Savannah, this is television, and television has power. But the people are tired of being lectured, they want truth, not a curated script." The control room flashes panic again. Twitter clips are already being cut, hashtags are forming in real time. Guthrie senses she's lost control of the energy and resorts to speed, question after question, trying to overwhelm. But Karoline remains unhurried, answering each with the precision of someone who understands the real audience isn't just in the studio, it's the millions at home, scrolling, replaying, sharing. And then it happens. A woman in the crowd, emboldened, calls out, "Finally, someone said it." The line wasn't planned, but it detonates like dynamite. Cameras swing, producers flinch. Guthrie freezes for a fraction of a second, then forces a tight smile. That's all Karoline needs. She looks directly into the lens, bypassing the anchor entirely. "You see? That's the voice of America, and you can't script it out." The moment is viral gold. Guthrie knows it, Karoline knows it, and the viewers know it too. For the first time in years, the balance of power in a major network interview has shifted, not toward the host, but toward the guest who refused to play the old game. The tension in the studio is almost physical now. Guthrie knows she can't allow this to continue unchecked. If Karoline leaves with the perception of total control, the clip will dominate the cycle for days. So she takes a gamble. Her voice tightens, her tone sharpens. "Karoline, you keep dodging accountability. Isn't it true that your rhetoric stirs division, that you play into the same chaos you claim to oppose? Americans are tired of theatrics. They want unity. Why can't you give them that?" The words are meant to corner her. A textbook strategy: accuse the opponent of hypocrisy, frame them as a showman rather than a serious leader. But Karoline doesn't blink. Instead, she leans in, visibly calm, almost surgical. "Unity," she repeats. "Savannah, let me ask you, was it unity when parents were silenced at school board meetings? Was it unity when people lost their jobs because they wouldn't follow government mandates? Was it unity when the media told Americans to shut up and trust us, only to admit later that half of what they said was wrong? Don't lecture me about unity when what you're really asking for is silence." The studio air shifts again. The crowd murmurs, a mix of shock and approval. Guthrie tries to interject, "That's not what I said," but Karoline rolls right over her. "No, Savannah, that's exactly what you said. And people are done with it." Now, the host is in a bind. Cutting to commercial would look like retreat. Pressing further risks another devastating reversal. For a brief second, she hesitates, and in live TV, a second is a lifetime. Karoline seizes it. "You invited me here to answer questions. Fine, but here's one for you. Why is it that every time someone pushes back, the media labels it as chaos? Could it be because the real chaos is losing control of the narrative?" The audience claps again, louder this time. The control room is frantic, but the moment is unstoppable. Guthrie's authority is slipping in real time, and Karoline has turned the very premise of the interview upside down. She looks straight into the lens, bypassing the host entirely. The people watching at home deserve to hear it. They're not the problem, they're not the chaos. They're the solution. And if you're afraid of their voice, maybe you're the one dividing us. Silence. A silence that feels louder than applause. Guthrie stares at her, lips pressed tight, knowing the viral moment is sealed. Karoline didn't just dodge the trap, she reset the terms of the debate. The crack in the armor is undeniable. Guthrie has lost the audience, and worse, she's lost the frame. The producers in the control room are in chaos. The segment was supposed to be a disciplined interrogation, polished and safe for the network's brand. Instead, it has become a showcase of rebellion. Every word Karoline speaks is cutting into the carefully constructed narrative, and the live audience knows it. You can practically hear the frantic voices through the earpiece Guthrie wears. Cut her off. Pivot now. Commercial, do something. But Guthrie can't, because cutting away at this exact moment would confirm the collapse. Millions watching at home would see it for what it is: censorship, a retreat, an admission that the guest outmaneuvered the host. Karoline senses this weakness and doubles down, no hesitation in her tone. She doesn't even look at Guthrie anymore, she's speaking to the camera, speaking directly to America. Here's what you need to know. They don't fear me, they fear you. They fear your ability to think for yourself, to question them, to demand answers instead of narratives. That's why they call pushback dangerous. Because once you realize your voice matters, theirs loses power. The words are electric. Guthrie shifts in her seat, trying to recover composure, but the damage is already visible. The studio's energy no longer flows toward her. Every second that ticks by, Karoline looks more like the one in control. Let's get back to the facts, Guthrie interrupts sharply, her voice strained, but Karoline cuts right through. No, Savannah. The facts are exactly what I'm giving. The fact that the media has tried to own the truth instead of report it. The fact that politicians and anchors work harder to shame people than to listen to them. And the fact that America is waking up. The audience explodes again, applause mixed with cheers. The control room flashes the signal, wrap it now. The camera pans out slightly, the network hoping to smooth over the turbulence with a wider shot. But instead, it captures the contrast perfectly, one host visibly rattled, one guest calm, confident, unflinching. By the time the segment closes, the story is already out of their hands. Twitter, TikTok, and YouTube are flooded with clips. Karoline silences Savannah, the moment control slipped, media exposed in real time. The network's attempt at tough questioning has transformed into its most humiliating viral disaster. For Guthrie, it's a nightmare. For Karoline, it's a coronation. And for viewers, it's confirmation of what they've long suspected, that sometimes the truth doesn't come from the anchor's chair, but from the person who refuses to bow to it. The cameras may have cut, but the story is only beginning. Within minutes of the broadcast, the clip is spreading across platforms faster than the network can contain it. Memes, reaction edits, and commentary videos dominate timelines. Hashtags trend. Hashtag Karoline owned the room, hashtag media meltdown, hashtag Savannah exposed. What was meant to be just another morning interview now threatens the credibility of the anchor and the network itself. Politicians take notice. Some scramble to condemn Karoline, framing her words as reckless, but even their statements feel defensive, almost nervous. Others, especially rising populist voices, seize the opportunity. She said what millions of Americans think but rarely get to hear on national TV. The divide deepens, but the momentum is unmistakably on her side. Meanwhile, in the newsroom, panic has set in. Senior producers draft memos, trying to spin the moment as a spirited exchange. But the problem is bigger than messaging. The raw footage is everywhere, unedited, uncontrolled. No cheering or commentary can soften the reality people saw with their own eyes, the host faltering, the guest unbroken. Even rival networks smell blood. By evening, panel discussions are running clips over and over, analysts debating whether this marks a turning point in media trust. Some call it a disaster, others call it democracy at work. The irony is rich. The very platform designed to control the narrative has unleashed one it can't contain. Karoline, meanwhile, doesn't retreat. She posts a single line on social media: "When you speak the truth, the people will hear it, no matter who tries to silence you." It's shared hundreds of thousands of times, turning into a rallying cry. Her supporters frame her not just as a guest on a program, but as the person who pulled back the curtain on the media itself. For Guthrie, the fallout is brutal. Editorials question her composure, online comments mock her attempts to regain control, and whispers in the industry suggest her credibility took a hit that won't easily heal. For Karoline, though, it's validation, a sign that her willingness to challenge, to disrupt, to refuse scripted roles, has given her a stage larger than she could have ever secured by playing along. And so, the battle doesn't end at the studio doors. It spreads to living rooms, newsrooms, and political offices across America. The moment is no longer just about an interview. It's about the system, the power behind the cameras, and the one woman who refused to bow before it. The clip doesn't just live on the news cycle, it mutates into culture. Within hours, late-night hosts are scrambling to weave the viral showdown into their monologues. Some attempt to ridicule Karoline, painting her as combative and brash. But in doing so, they replay the footage for millions more who hadn't even seen the original. And to the surprise of many producers, the laughter isn't universal. Audiences split, half chuckling at the jokes, the other half nodding, saying, "She's not wrong." On podcasts, talk radio shows, and YouTube commentary channels, the exchange becomes the topic of the day. Some frame it as a symbol of collapsing media trust. Others argue it marks a rare instance where someone outside the establishment seized the mic and refused to give it back. Suddenly, Karoline is being discussed not as a mere guest, but as a force reshaping the terms of debate. Even classrooms and coffee shops are buzzing. A high school debate coach plays the clip, asking students, "Was this journalism, or was this theater?" Meanwhile, office chatter shifts. People who normally avoid politics now reference that interview meltdown with an almost mischievous grin. It's no longer just about facts or policy, it's about authenticity, about who looked real and who looked rehearsed. Guthrie, ironically, becomes a meme. Freeze frames of her stumbling mid-question circulate with captions like, "When you realize you lost the room," or "That face when the script stops working." For Karoline, the memes cut the opposite way, confident still shots with captions like, "Say it louder for the people in the back," and "Unscripted." Unbroken. Unstoppable. The irony is striking. What was meant to showcase media dominance now showcases its fragility. Every attempt to minimize the moment only magnifies it, every dismissal sparks new discussion. The cultural current has shifted, and at its center is the unlikely figure who turned a morning show into a mirror reflecting the cracks in the establishment. The tremors from the Guthrie-Levitt interview didn't stop with memes or late-night comedy. They bled straight into the heart of Washington. Inside the Capitol, whispers turned into strategy sessions. Staffers replayed the clip in closed-door meetings, dissecting each exchange like a military post-mortem. To some, it was a masterclass in seizing control of narrative. To others, it was a warning shot that media gatekeeping could no longer guarantee a safe stage for establishment allies. Both parties, oddly enough, felt uneasy. Democrats privately admitted that Guthrie had underestimated Karoline, failing to land the knockout question they had counted on. Republicans, meanwhile, wrestled with what her raw, unfiltered moment meant for their broader messaging strategy. Was this a one-off spark, or the blueprint for fighting a media system stacked against them? The shock was bipartisan, though the interpretations couldn't have been more different. Political consultants rushed to frame the fallout. Some declared it proof that the mainstream press no longer dictated terms. Others worried that encouraging such fiery confrontations could backfire, turning debates into theater where substance drowns under spectacle. But for ordinary voters watching, the takeaway was simpler: someone had walked into the lion's den, and the lions didn't win. International outlets picked it up too. British and Australian papers framed it as America's media losing its grip, while foreign commentators pointed to it as a cautionary tale about overconfidence. Suddenly, this wasn't just an American story. It was a case study in global political communication, showing how one unscripted exchange could ripple through borders and shake assumptions. And in the end, the establishment's attempts to downplay it only amplified the clip further. Statements dismissing Karoline as grandstanding or hostile became instant soundbites replayed against the footage itself, making them look defensive. The harder they pushed back, the more it looked like they had something to fear. The political elite learned a bitter truth that week: in the age of viral media, control doesn't belong to the producers, it belongs to the people who can command the moment. In the weeks that followed, the Guthrie-Levitt clash stopped being just a viral clip and became a reference point, a shorthand in political culture. Commentators compared it to iconic TV confrontations from decades past, placing it in the lineage of moments that changed careers and shifted public trust in media. For many young voters, it was their first real taste of how a single exchange could expose imbalance and rewrite perception in real time. Karoline's defenders framed the moment as evidence that authenticity trumps polish. They argued that in an era saturated with scripted talking points, her raw defiance struck a nerve because it felt unscripted, even dangerous. Supporters said she hadn't just answered tough questions, she had challenged the very framework in which those questions were designed. Critics, meanwhile, warned that such defiance could breed chaos, undermining respect for institutions that still held influence over public discourse. But one thing both sides admitted: you couldn't ignore what had happened. It was sticky. It lingered. The media world adjusted too. Networks began coaching anchors more aggressively, preparing them for the possibility that interviews might spiral outside the usual script. Producers debated how much risk was worth taking, whether to keep giving controversial figures a microphone, or to retreat into safer, less combustible programming. Ironically, the attempt to avoid another Guthrie moment only underscored how much that moment had altered their approach. And then there were the viewers, the millions who kept replaying it on their phones, sharing it, adding captions and edits. To them, it wasn't about insider politics or institutional norms. It was about watching someone ordinary in posture, extraordinary in delivery, refuse to be cornered. It felt less like a politician's soundbite and more like a fight anyone might dream of having, the underdog facing down the host and flipping the narrative. That's why it lasted. It wasn't just a clash on live TV. It was a story of imbalance meeting resistance, of confidence collapsing into panic, of the unexpected becoming unforgettable. For Karoline, it marked a turning point in her trajectory. For Guthrie, it became a cautionary tale. And for the audience, it was a reminder that sometimes the most powerful words aren't rehearsed, they're the ones you force out when the pressure is highest. Tonight, we've witnessed more than a debate, it was a collision between two worlds: the polished safety of mainstream media, and the raw defiance of someone who refused to be cornered. Savannah Guthrie came prepared with every tool in the interviewer's arsenal, but Karoline Levitt showed that when conviction meets courage, the script can be torn apart in seconds. What started as a routine interview turned into a spectacle that rewrote the power dynamic on live television. Millions watched as the questions designed to trap were flipped into answers that exposed the weakness of the trap itself. Guthrie's sharpest weapons dulled, and Karoline's voice cut through louder than any pre-written headline could. In the end, this wasn't just about two people on opposite sides of a desk. It was about who controls the narrative in America, the gatekeepers of the media, or the individuals brave enough to break through their frame. And tonight, the answer was clear. Thank you for watching. The story doesn't end here, it begins with what you do next.